The car you see on your screen is the Lada Samara T3, a bold project by the private French team Poch. It combined a tubular space frame, all-wheel drive, a Porsche engine, and the participation of the legendary Jackie Ickx behind the wheel. All of this allowed them to compete on equal footing with factory giants like Peugeot and Mitsubishi. However, their success in the debut year was driven not only by technology, but also by experience. By that time, Team Poch already had a strong history of racing Soviet-built Lada cars, a partnership that began with their very first Dakar rally. This is the story of how Soviet steel and French grit came together to take on the desert. The very first Paris-Dakar rally began in December 1978. 80 cars, 90 motorcycles, and 12 trucks set out from the streets of Paris to cross the African desert. 182 crews in total. By January 1979, only 74 crews had reached the finish line in Dakar, the capital of Senegal. And that wasn't surprising. Most of the participants were amateurs with little experience in such extreme racing conditions. Two years earlier, the VAZ 2121 Niva was introduced in the Soviet Union, a vehicle that combined the comfort and convenience of a passenger car with the off-road capability of a true 4x4. It was the world's first off-road vehicle to feature a unibody construction and permanent all-wheel drive, a unique concept for its time. The Niva gave a significant boost to Soviet car sales in Europe, where it was sold under the Lada Niva brand. 5 Nivas lined up at the start of the very first Dakar rally, all entered by French teams. 2 of them were fielded by the Poch family. Jacques Poch and his son Jean-Jacques were passionate about Soviet vehicles. Their family business imported and sold cars from the USSR and France. At the time, Eastern European cars were popular on Western markets, mainly because of their low price, but potential buyers still needed to be convinced of their reliability. Jacques Poch followed a simple but powerful principle: win on Sunday, sell on Monday. In preparation for the rally raid, the cars underwent only minimal modifications compared to the standard production version. The interior was fitted with a roll cage, and larger fuel and water tanks were installed. But the transmission and the 1.6-liter engine producing 80 horsepower remained unchanged. Despite the racing setup, the Niva actually became heavier than the stock version. Even so, the cars performed remarkably well in the desert. Both Lada Nivas entered by Team Poch managed to reach the finish line. The following year, the Niva received an upgraded engine producing 110 horsepower, and a year later, up to 140 horsepower. The cooling system and suspension were also improved, and the original 4-speed gearbox was replaced with a 5-speed, allowing the car to reach speeds of up to 160 kilometers an hour. It didn't take long for the new version to prove itself. In 1982, a Lada Niva entered by Team Poch finished second overall, ahead of far more powerful and expensive rivals from Mercedes and Range Rover. An incredible result for a car born behind the Iron Curtain. And remarkably, that same achievement was repeated the very next year. With each passing year, the racing Nivas looked less and less like their civilian counterparts. They gradually evolved, gaining a new suspension setup, an extended wheelbase, and lightweight carbon body panels. The heart of the transformation came with the installation of a Peugeot PRV V6 engine, pushing the power output up to 300 horsepower. An extraordinary figure for a vehicle that now weighed less than 1 ton. By that point, it was a full-fledged prototype, sharing almost nothing with the original production model. But this evolution wasn't born out of ambition alone. It was driven by necessity. By the late 1980s, the level of competition in the Dakar Rally had become so intense, so technologically demanding, that trying to fight for top positions with production-based vehicles was no longer realistic. And so, the humble Soviet 4x4, once praised for its simplicity and ruggedness, had become a full-blown rally prototype, built to challenge the very best machines in the world. But even that was gradually becoming not enough. By the late 1980s, the Dakar Rally was no longer the same event it had been a decade earlier. What began as a wild adventure for amateurs had evolved into a professional battlefield, dominated by factory teams with massive budgets. Private 4x4s were no longer the main contenders. The fight was now against factory-backed rally monsters, capable of tearing across the desert at speeds over 200 kilometers an hour. After the ban of the dangerously fast Group B category in the World Rally Championship, some manufacturers, like Peugeot, turned their attention to Dakar. As a result, the desert was soon filled with reimagined Group B prototypes, reborn for the sands of Africa. Among them were familiar faces from the rally stages, such as the Peugeot 205. Once a compact hatchback, it was transformed into a mid-engine, all-wheel drive desert beast with massive suspension travel and brutal power. Others, like the Porsche 959, were developed specifically for the Dakar. This was Porsche's technological masterpiece, equipped with twin turbochargers, advanced all-wheel drive, and electronics far ahead of their time. To stand a chance against machines like these, a completely new type of car was needed, one built on the same bold philosophy as the competition. And so, the Poch family made a bold move. In 1989, the Lada Poch team skipped the major rallies, pouring all their resources into the development of a brand new prototype. The foundation for this project was the then-new VAZ 2108. Originally developed in the late 1970s with assistance from Porsche engineers who helped tune the engine and suspension, the 2108 featured modern styling, front-wheel drive, and improved aerodynamics, a major leap forward for the Soviet automotive industry at the time. The car quickly gained popularity not only in the USSR, but also across Europe, where it was marketed under the name Lada Samara. France's weapon for the Dakar was given a name, Lada Samara T3. And while it may look like a lifted road car wrapped in a wide body kit, in reality, it shared very little with the production model. Only the headlights, taillights, windshield, and perhaps most importantly, the badge were carried over. The Samara T3 was a purebred racing prototype, built around a tubular space frame made of ultralight aerospace-grade steel. Its body panels were crafted from Kevlar, making the structure both light and exceptionally strong. Under the hood was a 3.8-liter Porsche engine, producing 360 horsepower and featuring air-oil cooling, as was typical of Porsche's engineering at the time. The all-wheel drive transmission was borrowed from the Porsche 964 Carrera 4, allowing the driver to manually distribute torque between the axles via levers inside the cabin. One might assume that this abundance of German components came from Porsche's earlier collaboration with the Soviet auto industry on the civilian Lada Samara, but in truth, that had nothing to do with it. The man responsible for bringing Porsche power to the Samara T3 was none other than the legendary Belgian driver, Jackie Ickx. In the past, Ickx had raced for Ferrari in Formula 1 and won the 24 Hours of Le Mans 6 times, 4 of those victories behind the wheel of a Porsche. After a tragic season in 1985, Jackie retired from circuit racing and fully dedicated himself to rally raids. He began competing in the Dakar Rally in 1981, and by 1983, he had already claimed victory, driving a Mercedes G280. Thanks to his close ties with Porsche, Ickx was involved from the very beginning in the development of the iconic Porsche 959 project, and successfully raced it through the African deserts. He also had experience piloting a factory-backed Peugeot 405, giving him a deep understanding of the most advanced and competitive Dakar machines of that era. And finally, he knew Jacques Poch well, the man behind the Lada Poch team, having raced for them in the 1987 and 1988 Dakar rallies at the wheel of a Lada Niva. Everything aligned. It was Jackie Ickx and Jacques Poch who became the driving forces behind the Samara T3 project. Thanks to Ickx's strong ties with Porsche, the car received modern German components, while the design and engineering were handled by 2 renowned French engineering firms specializing in motorsport, Orica and Serra. Ickx himself took part in testing and final development, personally overseeing the car's behavior in real-world rally conditions. The project's budget reached 25 million French francs, a figure comparable to the spending of major factory teams at the time. the Lada Samara T3 didn't get a gentle introduction through smaller events. It was thrown straight into the fire, making its debut in the world's toughest race, the 1990 Paris-Dakar Rally. 3 Samaras took on the challenge, driven by Jackie Ickx, fellow former Formula One driver Patrick Tambay, and Jérôme Rivière. By the end of the brutal marathon, 2 out of 3 cars reached the finish. Ickx finished 7th overall, and Rivière came in 11th. A strong debut for such an ambitious project. But the greatest success for the Samara T3 came later that same year, at Egypt's Rallye des Pharaons. French driver Hubert Auriol led the team to its first major victory, with his teammate Patrick Tambay finishing 2nd. It was a true triumph. Interestingly, Jackie Ickx, who had recently left Lada Poch to sign with Citroën, finished only 4th with his new team. In January 1991, 3 Samaras once again lined up at the start of the Dakar. But due to mechanical issues, the team couldn't repeat its earlier success. Auriol finished 5th, while Tambay came in 7th. The car still had the potential to win, but sadly, that potential was never fully realized. By the end of 1990, the Lada logos began to disappear from the bodywork. The Soviet Union was living out its final months, and after its collapse, racing would no longer be a priority, not for a very long time. After its brief but bright moments in the spotlight, the Lada Samara T3 eventually ended up in Russia. In 1993, Jackie Ickx sold all 4 cars to Avtovaz, where 2 of them were repaired and restored. By early 1994, they were sent to compete in the 1994 Dakar Rally, but unfortunately, neither made it to the finish line. One was forced to retire due to a failed engine control unit, while the other was lost to fire. The remaining cars would never return to Dakar. The reason was simple. The International Automobile Federation had officially banned Group T3, the very category that the Samara T3 had been built for, a class of purpose-built rally raid prototypes. Still, the cars continued to compete in smaller rally raid events. In 1995, one of them managed to finish 2nd overall in the Master Rally, a demanding transcontinental race from Paris to Moscow to Beijing. It would become the best result for the Samara T3 during its final years on Russian soil. And so, the story of a bold project came to a close, where Soviet design, French engineering, and German mechanics came together with a single purpose: to conquer the desert. The Lada Samara T3 became a symbol of one private team's daring attempt to challenge the titans of world motorsport. It may never have claimed victory in Dakar, but it earned its place in rallying history as one of the most unusual and inspiring machines of its time.